parents sent me away when they had my sister. 12 years later they called and asked me to come back just to prove that they're good parents after she started acting like a failure. So when I, 20 now, was 8 years old, my parents decided that they were done with me and sent me to live with my aunt. Even before I turned 8, I knew for a fact that my parents did not really like living with me, and I was mostly just a burden to them. They had me when they were really young, in their early 20s, and they had just started working at the time. So as I was growing up, I really watched them struggle to build a life for themselves while raising me. I guess that's why they always resented me, but I only came to the conclusion recently I didn't have any idea why they seemed to dislike me so much, back when I was little. I spent most of those 8 years trying to win them over, but nothing ever worked. I was always emotionally neglected. However, whenever we were among friends and family, they would act quite differently, probably because they couldn't risk anybody getting to know that things were not as great as they seemed. They would intimidate me to keep my mouth shut as well, so I would do so because I did not want to risk making them hate me even more than they already did. This went on for many years, and obviously my emotional and mental health deteriorated, so I started doing pretty badly at school and even acted out frequently. I was a bit of a problem child, and I don't really blame myself for any of it. I think if my parents had treated me well, I wouldn't have behaved like that. They scolded me, grounded me, and did everything possible to bring me under control when the teachers from my school started complaining about my behavior and grades. But I was determined to misbehave even more because at least this way, I would get them to pay attention to me, if not by trying to win them over. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for me, this plan of mine backfired when my mom got pregnant for a second time around the time of my 8th birthday. For the first time in forever, they seemed really happy and made the announcement at my 8th birthday party, and I was really confused about what that meant for me. But I found out in a couple of weeks when I saw my mother packing my bags, and my dad sat me down and told me that I was being sent away to live with my aunt because I was clearly not doing well here and they wanted the best for me. I was young, but I was not stupid, and I knew for a fact that they were just getting rid of me because now that they were getting another baby, they were going to replace me. I was very upset about that, naturally, and I started throwing tantrums because I really did not want to be sent away from everything that I knew, my home, my friends, and all of that. If I'm being honest, I didn't even want to be sent away from my parents because no matter how they treated me, at least they were still my parents. But my parents really couldn't care less about me. Throwing tantrums, they decided to ship me off to my aunt's place, anyway. She lived out of state, and I still remember that, even on my journey there, I was miserable and I really tried very hard to convince my parents that I would improve my grades and behave myself if they gave me a chance to stay with them, but they had made up their minds. Back then, it really hadn't occurred to me in that maybe this was not about the grades and my behavior in the first place, and they would have resented me even if I was the best kid in the world. Anyway, when we got to my aunt's place, they stayed there for a couple of days and helped me settle in, but even then I was quite upset. My aunt was the only person who made the transition easier for me because she is perhaps the kindest and most loving soul one could ever find. My aunt is my dad's older sister and the oldest of 4 siblings. She had never married or had any kids of her own, which is probably why she had agreed to raise me. While all her other siblings had left the farm that they had grown up on for other pursuits in their career, she had decided to stay and work on the farm that their parents had left of them. She could tell that I was very upset while moving in with her, so she tried to tell me that everything would be fine and I would really like this place once I got to know it well, and that really helped me. After a couple of days, when my parents finally left, I started to break down, and even then, my aunt was the only person who was there for me because even though she kept calling my parents, trying to get them to speak to me so that I would feel better, they hardly ever answered the phone. I wouldn't do anything but cry for the next couple of weeks, and my aunt was there for me all along. So gradually I started to feel better. And after a couple of months of staying with her, I stopped missing my parents altogether because honestly, living with her was much better. I would work on the farm and go to school, and strangely enough, I wasn't doing too badly at school while living with my aunt. I had made quite a lot of friends, the schoolwork did not seem difficult, and the teachers seemed to like me as well. Basically, my life started to improve as soon as I was sent away by my parents, and even though we would see each other on the holidays, I realized that I was much better off without them in my life. They had told my aunt that they were sending me to live with her because I was a troubled child and I needed a change of environment to do better, but after staying with her for a couple of months, I told her the truth about how my parents had never really wanted me and how they had always treated me badly. And I thanked her for taking me in, and after that, even my aunt's behavior towards my parents started to change and she became a lot colder and distant to them. We saw them at family, get-togethers, and events a couple of times after that, but in the past 12 years, we haven't really interacted much. They don't seem to care how I'm doing, and I'm happier without them. My sister is around 12 years old now, and I don't even have a relationship with her, but that's probably for the best because from whatever I've heard from other members of our family, she isn't really growing up to be a nice person. Even though she's just 12, she has a really nasty attitude and doesn't know how to speak to people politely. And apparently, she's even one of the biggest troublemakers at school. But that's trouble for my parents to handle, not me. I've been doing pretty well in my life since I'm in college right now, and I'm getting a degree in business so that I can take over the farm and handle the business when my aunt cannot do it anymore. The college that I go to is pretty close, so I can go back home every weekend and it's quite convenient. Last weekend, while I was at home, my parents decided to call my aunt since they didn't know how to contact me, and after almost 12 years, I had a proper conversation with them on the phone. However, it was not really a good conversation because what they were asking for was ridiculous. When my aunt handed the phone to me, I was quite intrigued after some small talk about my life. My parents told me that they were really proud of the fact that I was doing so well for myself, and then they told me that they wanted another shot at parenting, so they wanted me to keep in touch with them and come back to them after college ended. I was really taken aback by that because I really couldn't imagine any scenario where they would say this. So I ended up asking them why they would say something like that all of a sudden, and then they told me that it was mostly because of my sister. Apparently, she is even more of a problem child than I used to be, and it's really shameful for them. So they want me to reconnect with them and prove to people that they can raise good kids as well. So basically, the real reason that they wanted to reconnect with me was because they wanted to show their close friends and family members that we were not incapable of raising good children. I'm guessing that people had started judging them because when I used to stay with them, I used to be quite a problematic kid, and now that my sister is growing up to be the same way, the pressure is on for them to prove that they are not bad parents. It's a ridiculous reason to want me back, and what's crazier is that they actually expected me to entertain that idea on the phone. So I made it very clear to them that I was not coming back, and neither was I going to help them prove anything to their friends and family because I really had nothing to do with them. And they did not have anything to do with me, that was for sure. I think I have already mentioned how I was doing terribly while I was living with my parents and how much better I started to do in my life when I moved in with my aunt. So really, I don't think they had any problem children. I think they were the problem all along. Besides, it would be a huge lie if I said that my parents had raised me well because they had not raised me at all. It was my aunt who had done that job, and I was not going to let them take credit for it. Most of the people in our family, and even their friends, knew that I was being taken care of by my aunt anyway, but they planned on telling them that apparently they had kept in touch with me over the past 12 years and visited quite frequently, so even they had a hand in it. And that was not true either. So I told them that I was not going to help him improve anything and that they were on their own. So they started throwing a tantrum about how they had supported me and my aunt throughout the past 12 years, but they had only done the bare minimum and sent us a check every month, which barely even covered anything, and ultimately my aunt would have to pay for stuff out of her own pockets anyway. But even that, she did it without complaint, and here they were, showing off the bare minimum. They started to tell me that my sister had turned out to be a failure, and it was really humiliating for them, so I had to help them out because they were my parents after all. I lost it at that point, and I told them that they were anything but my parents, and I don't even consider my family anymore, so they needed to leave me and my aunt alone because she was the only family that I had. So Ida for telling my parents that I don't consider them my family anymore? Update 1. Hello, guys. So a couple of days ago, I made my original post, and most of you guys agree that I am NTA. So for that, I'm really thankful to you because it really puts things into perspective for me. To be honest, the only reason I had been doubting myself was that in the past 1 week, my parents had left no stone unturned to try and convince me that what I said was a really horrible thing, and they were making it feel like I had been nasty to them on purpose. But honestly, I really didn't think that I had said anything that was out of pocket to them. I thought I was being perfectly reasonable, and it's not even like I had cursed at them or something. However, after reading the comments and stuff, I realized that they were only trying to make me feel guilty, probably because they wanted to get me to agree to their terms and come back home so they could show people how successful they have been as parents. I have them blocked everywhere, but they still have been texting me through other accounts and phone numbers, and it's getting pretty annoying. I did speak to my aunt about it, and she just told me that I needed to ignore all of it because if I knew that I was right, there was nothing that I needed to feel sorry about. She has also spoken to a couple of other family members, and it was mostly just to find out why they were so desperate to prove that they were good parents all of a sudden. And that's how she found out that a couple of weeks ago, at my sister's 12th birthday party, She had been caught smoking, and when my parents tried to take it away from her, she threw such a massive tantrum that she ended up making my mom cry. That was the day that my mom's older sister, my other aunt, her parents, and a couple of other family members told her that it was their failure that their 12-year-old daughter had been able to access a cigarette, and if they had been more proactive as parents then this wouldn't have happened anyway. Apparently, they had spoiled my sister, not ever since she was really young, and had never said no to her for anything. They even gave her a huge amount of pocket money and let her do whatever she wanted with it, not even bothering to do the bare minimum of supervising that money. Basically, my 12-year-old sister could do whatever she wanted because she knew that she had her parents wrapped around her finger in the cigarette incident had caused a lot of their friends and family to really judge them and call them out on how they were raising their child. And now, my parents were just desperate to prove that they were not really bad parents, which is why they wanted me to come back to them so they could show me around like a trophy. It was really pathetic of them, and more importantly, they had to know that this plan was not going to work because everyone knew that I was being raised by my aunt. In fact, even the people that my aunt had spoken to said that they had also disapproved of my parents' decision to send me away when I was not doing well because that's not how you treat your kids. When they are not doing well, you try to help them out and not just wash your hands off of them. Several times, they had even told my parents to bring me back to them after the birth of my sister so we could grow up together, but my parents had brushed it all off, saying that I was happier with my aunt and they knew what was best for me. I really don't understand how my parents think, or if they are even capable of thinking about anybody apart from themselves. Even with my sister, it was really easy for them to tell me that she was a failure and write her off while trying to get me back, and it scares me that she's just 12 years old. She needs some guidance and counseling, that's all. I believe that that will be enough for her to be brought back onto the right path, but I don't think my parents are the right kind of people to do that. She is the one kid that they sent me away for because they wanted to save all their resources for her, their time, their money, and their energy. And now, this is the way they have been raising her and treating her, even though they sacrificed their relationship with their oldest kid for her sake, or so they say. I don't think they care about any of their kids at all, and I don't really think that they were ever cut out to be parents in the first place. It would be very easy for me to hate my sister because she got everything that I never did from our parents, the love, the care, and the affection, and of course the money and time. But honestly, I just feel bad for her because in spite of all of that, it's not what you need to raise a kid the right way. My parents somehow managed to fail both their children, and that's what's the most shocking bit about this situation. I just hope that they stop calling me and texting me because I really don't want to speak to them, especially after what I found out from my aunt and other members of the family. The next time that they try to get to me and make me feel guilty, they are definitely going to get it from me. Update 2. So it has been a couple of days since my update, and like I had said, if my parents tried to make me feel guilty once more, they would get it from me, and they did. A couple of hours ago, they called me up from a phone, and as soon as I picked up, they started telling me that I owed it to them to apologize for what I had said and come back home. I was already feeling quite another weather today and was not in a good mood. That phone call just made things worse, and I lost my temper. I started yelling at them, and I told them that I was not going to apologize for anything that I had said, because it was all the truth. They really were not my parents, they had done nothing to earn that, and if I really had to call anybody my family, it would be my aunt. She was the one who had raised me, they had nothing to do with me for the past 12 years, and even before that, all they had done was neglect me. So if they can't handle the fact that I don't think of them as my family, they don't have anybody else to blame but themselves, and they need to introspect instead of calling me up, again and again, to try and make me feel bad for something that I really don't have to feel bad about. They tried to interrupt me and tell me that my aunt might have raised me, but they were the ones who had supported us, and we shouldn't forget that, and I told them that the money that they would send us badly covered any of my expenses, and my aunt would have to pay for everything out of her own pockets anyway, so it was meaningless. Besides, they wouldn't even have had to send any child support to my aunt if they had bothered to keep their child with them, so they needed to stop acting like they were doing my aunt a huge favor by sending us money as child support. I told them that it was the bare minimum that they could have done for her after dumping their son onto her, and it's out of the greatness of her heart that she never spoke about this to the other people in the family and spoiled the reputation, even though she could have easily done so. They needed to stop talking about the money that they had spent because money is not everything, and that's clearly a lesson they should have learned after the incident at my sister's birthday party because they kept throwing money at their youngest daughter as well and looking where that landed them. She was a spoiled brat, and even though they were the ones referring to her as a failure, the real failures were always going to be my parents because they had failed us both. When I said that to them, they instantly got defensive and told me that I had no idea what I was talking about, that my sister was really happy and the incident at her birthday was just a one-off thing. But what I know for a fact is that happy kids, especially 12-year-olds, don't just start smoking because they can. I told them that I was pretty sure that they were just saying this to convince themselves because I was definitely not convinced that they were doing the best that they could while raising my sister. In fact, they were doing the exact same thing that they had done to me, just the opposite of it. While they had failed me by not giving me any attention, they were doing the same to her, but alongside that, they were also giving her a bunch of money to burn and spoiling her by not disciplining her during the time that they spent together. And that was very obvious to me, even though I had never even met the kid. Besides, the fact that they had felt the need to reach out to me to prove to other people that they were good parents, it just went on to show that they couldn't care less about actually being good to their children. They just wanted to prove to everyone that they were good to their children, and there was a huge difference between the two. I guess this was too much truth for my parents to handle, and they immediately started screaming at me, cussing me out, and telling me that I had no idea what I was talking about. But judging by the way, they had immediately become defensive and started yelling at me. I would say that I had hit the nail pretty much on the head. We kept arguing for a couple of minutes more, and then they told me that they were glad that they had sent me away all those years ago because I was clearly not good enough to be their son in the first place, and they were really happy that they had chosen to stay with their daughter instead. Then, they hung up, probably thinking that whatever they had said to me those last couple of seconds would have made me feel really bad, but I really didn't care. I was just happy that I had won this argument because otherwise, they wouldn't have had to resort to such low blows. And now, I'm hoping that they will think twice before picking fights with me or calling me up again. The only thing that I do have regrets about is that I don't think I'll be able to do anything about this situation with my sister. It's a pity because I know for a fact that she would be able to do well if she was just brought out of the environment that my parents have created for her. But well, you win some, you lose some. Update 3. So it's been a week since I last spoke to my parents. They did not bother me after that last phone call, and I think that's good for them. Anyway, from what I know, they have been telling everybody in the family that the cigarette incident with my sister was just a one-time thing, and she had never done this before, and neither would this ever happen again. But nobody was fooled. People had guessed that there was something going on with her, and even if this was the first time she had smoked a cigarette, there was no telling what else she had done in the past, and the only people who were responsible for this, but my parents, because it was obvious that this had happened due to a severe lack of supervision and discipline. Normally, I don't really encourage judging people without knowing them, but I know my parents and I think they deserve to be judged. I mean, what kind of people just get rid of one kid when they are pregnant with another? My parents, that's who. I'm just glad that the rest of my family is finally realizing how messed up they are as people and are starting to maintain their distance from them. In fact, my aunt has even started telling people, after staying silent for so long, about how the real reason that they had left me with her was not because I was a troubled kid in the past, but just because they wanted to spend more time with their other kid and did not want me. And even though I had actually been a troubled kid, it was not my fault. It had just been because of my parents, because otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to do well, even after I had moved away. She had kept all of this to herself for the past 12 years because she really did not want to spoil my parents' reputation, but at this point, she thought that they deserved it. They had it a long time coming, and it was only out of our decency that we hadn't spoken up about it. People are already quite wary of my parents because of how defensive they have become, and they are obviously in denial of the fact that they have failed as parents, and our version of what had happened all those years ago when they had left me with my aunt. It has just made everybody realize that my parents are the real villains and that they really do not deserve either of us. Not my sister, and definitely not me. Some people might think that we are going overboard and that we don't need to kick them and they are done, but honestly, none of this would have been happening if they hadn't called me up and told me to help them pretend that they were good parents. So, they totally deserve this. Update 4. Hey, so it's been a couple of weeks since I last posted, and there is a major update because my grandparents, my maternal ones, have decided to fight for custody of my sister. I had kept in touch with most of my family, even after my parents had sent me away to live with my aunt. So my grandparents and I have a normal relationship, which is why when they called me up a couple of days back to ask me how my relationship with my parents had been when they had sent me away, I decided to finally tell them the truth. They told me that they were glad that I had decided to finally speak up about how they had treated me back then because, for so many years, they had believed that their daughter and her husband, my parents, had had a good enough reason to send me away, but now they were realizing that no reason was good enough to send their own child away. They apologized to me for not seeing the truth sooner, and I had to tell them that it was fine because honestly, everybody has a lot on their plates, and I'm sure that I was not exactly suffering on the surface, so nobody could have ever realized without being told that I was not being treated right by my parents. Apparently, after the incident with my sister, they had been hearing rumors from a lot of other members of the family about how I had been treated since my aunt had finally decided to speak up about how my parents said had absolutely nothing to do with me after they had dropped me off here. On hearing that, my grandparents decided to look into the matter themselves because they did not want their younger grandkids to be suffering through the same things that I did. So they spoke to me, and when they realized that my parents had not changed a bit and they were still trying to just show that they were good parents, but couldn't be bothered to actually be there for their kids, they decided to fight for the custody of my sister so she could be brought up differently. I think it's the right thing to do, and I can say it with full confidence because my life definitely improved after I stopped living with my parents, so I think it will be the same for her as well. Maybe in a different way, but I'm pretty sure that it will really help her. They have already managed to get temporary custody of her, and she seems kind of indifferent to this massive change, which means that with time, she is going to feel better about it. My grandparents are confident that they will be able to get full custody of her soon enough, but they will make sure that my parents also have visitation rights. The best thing that has come out of the situation, in my opinion, is that my sister has tried to put in an effort to build a relationship with me, and we've been talking to each other on the phone for the last couple of days. She seems happy to talk to me, and I already know that for the past couple of years, she had been instructed by our parents not to speak to me because I was not a good influence. But now, she's finally coming around to me, and maybe we will be able to build a good relationship by the end of this. I'm hopeful enough. Ready to go unlimited? Get immediate access to